So we talked about recruiting and AI, but once we have the right employees and we hired them, then it's really, really important to talk about employee well-being. And because happy and healthy employees are at least the key to success. They stay longer at the company, they are motivated and productive, and they support others and function as like ambassadors. So it's really, really important to get employees who are happy, who are healthy, and who are fit. And I think that's it. I think you get the point. But the question is how to get there. So what is a happy workplace and how does employee well-being look like? One hint could be the results from the UK's 4-day week pilot. So there was a trial or a pilot where companies tried the 4-day work week, and 65 of 61 65 of 61 companies taking part in the pilot will continue the 4-day week. So this is more than 90%. And maybe this is a hint on where we want to go when we want to get more happy and healthy employees. This is what I want to discuss with my panel now. But first we will have a first impulse from Dr. Karina van der Voorde. She is Associate Professor at Dutch University Tilburg. She's an absolute expert for human resource studies, and she's driven by the connection of individual well-being of employees and the success of companies. And this is where she will talk about in a talk. So highly welcome. Great to have you here, Karina van der Voorde.
Thank you for the invitation. I am indeed an associate professor in strategic human resource management. And just for your note, I'm not a well-being expert per se, but I'm interested in how HRM policies and practices affect workers and organizations. So today I will briefly zoom in on employee well-being and productivity in the context of strategic human resource management, and in particular the search for happy, healthy, and productive employees. So within the field of strategic human resource management, the impact that policies and practices have on organizational performance has attracted much interest across the last 30 years. And also our reviews support the idea that progressive HRM policies and practices really contribute to the financial bottom line of the organization. And some academics, primarily from Europe, also from Germany, debated this narrow focus on financial performance. So in particular, they argued to search for a happy workplace and to take a more balanced perspective. And we also noticed that starting in the late 90s that we see an increase in attention being paid to how organizations can manage their human resources in a way that allows organizations to achieve sustained success in both financial performance and in employee well-being. And as part of this growing body of employee-centered human resource management research, a new lively debate started about the impacts of human resource policies and practices on firms and on workers. And some see benefits for both. This is the mutual gains perspective, whereas others are a little bit more critical and question the gains for workers. So in the left, you see the mutual gains perspective, and this is rooted in the idea that HRM and especially the adoption of practices helps to enhance performance through people. So by improving positive employee attitudes and well-being at work. So both employees and the organization benefit from HRM, so a win-win situation. But we also have the conflicting outcome perspective. And this perspective suggests that only management is expected to benefit. So here, organizational performance is achieved at the cost of employees. And in 2006, when I started my PhD research, I became involved in this debate. So I reviewed the literature and to take stock of this progress in this research area, and I answered continuously the research question like, is there more support for the mutual gains or for the conflicting outcome perspective? But before I present you my main findings, it's important to pay attention to the meaning of employee well-being. Because, and this is actually a spoiler alert, the answer to the question, so is there more evidence for the mutual gains versus the conflicting outcome perspective, really depends on the specific type of well-being. So if we speak about employee well-being very broadly in the academic literature, we speak about the quality of an employee's experience and functioning at work. But if we zoom in, we have three dimensions. The first one is more psychological or so-called happiness well-being. This focuses really on those subjective experiences at work, like are you satisfied at work? Or are you engaged in your work? Do you feel your work is meaningful for you? But there are also two other dimensions. So we have the health-related well-being, and this consists of all kinds of indicators related to the health of employees, like employee stress, but also burnout, feelings of anxiety. And we do have relationship well-being. And this is a little bit different than the previous two because these focus on individuals or individual perceptions, and the relationship really focuses on interactions and also quality of relationships between employees, their supervisors, and the organizations they work for. So returning to the main findings. So when we review all the evidence that is out there about the triangle of relationships between HR well-being and performance, we can conclude that in terms of happiness and relationship well-being, there is more support for the mutual gains perspective. So this means that the effect of HRM on performance is established because of the positive effects of HRM on happiness and relationship types of well-being. So really clear evidence, organizational performance via or through people. And we can explain this following the social exchange theory and also job demands resources theory, because these HRM policies and practices can signal organizations' investment in employees, resulting in a positive exchange. And they can also make the work environment more resourceful, and thereby facilitating both happiness and relationship well-being. However, in contrast, if we take a look at health-related well-being, here we found more support for a conflicting outcome perspective. So this means that we can conclude that employee well-being and performance are a little bit more like parallel outcomes. So following the, again, job demands and resources theory, by offering all these policies and practices to employees, organizations financially profit, but also place additional work demands on employees and communicate that work effort is expected. So potentially HRM policies and practices can also intensify work, as employees are put under greater pressure at work. However, this research primarily considers employee well-being as a means to achieve performance or as a parallel outcome next to performance. And thereby it really ignores that well-being is an important outcome in and of itself. And this also aligns with one of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which is about sustained and inclusive economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent work. So if we take that into account, we unfortunately also see that a lot of companies are really struggling with the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic, inflation and labor shortages. So organizations are under severe pressure to create economic value while also safeguarding employee well-being. And this is a real challenge, or at least in the Netherlands, because here you see two examples. For example, in the Dutch hospitals, and since the onset of the pandemic, they have been unable to provide adequate staff to deal with the increased demands. And as a result of tightening budgets, the sector has been dealing with a limited investment in employees for many years. And an increasing number of hospital workers report feeling underappreciated in terms of low wages, limited training, development, and career opportunities, and are emotionally exhausted. Many are now willing to strike, report sick, or even leave the profession. And the Dutch Healthcare Authority even warned that access to care may not be longer guaranteed for all of us. Another example is Schiphol Airport, which announced the cancellation of several flights because of staff shortages. And in particular, the operational staff was laid off at the start of the pandemic in order to survive financially. But many did not return when the demand for air travel increased. And this was because there was a low investment in them. So again, poor wages and bad employment conditions. And Schiphol has to start again recruiting new staff, but did that too late in a very tight labor market. So current staff really suffers from high workload, long working hours, resulting sometimes in chaos at the airport. So these two cases really illustrate that there sometimes is a trade-off. So this is the one in the upper left corner here, unhappy and unhealthy employees, but on the other hand, also high performance. So emphasizing and prioritizing one goal, so either financial or social goals, results in enormous costs for societies, organizations, and employees. So consequently, ensuring financial performance and fostering employee well-being, I think, is vital for all of us. So therefore, I would argue it's really time that we adopt a long-term perspective, both in human resource management and in social sustainability literature, and enrich our insights into how organizations can successfully balance social and financial goals in managing human resources to achieve, indeed, long-run, happy, healthy employees and financially thriving organizations. So a win-win situation, while of course acknowledging that sometimes trade-offs or tensions are involved. Thank you.
So I think you outlined very well that it's not something like nice to have, that we have well-being, that we have employee well-being, but I think it's crucial for the success of companies. And so I'm really happy to discuss this now further with our other guests. So you stay here. And then we also have Lara from Petersdorff-Campen. Hi, welcome, good morning. She is the founder and CEO of Evermood. She founded Evermood 3 years ago, and Evermood is a work-life platform helping companies and organizations to develop and implement measures for employee well-being. Great to have you here. Hi, Lara.
Lovely to be here. Thank you so much.
And then we have also here Thorben Albrecht. He's the head of policy from the IG Metall, and there he's responsible for strategic issues, political planning, and socio-political questions. Great to have you here. I'm looking forward for the discussion with you.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Great. So as always, time is running and we have a lot of questions and topics to discuss. So I would start directly with and a question I think we could all, or you could all answer very long, but I would ask you to focus on the key aspects. And maybe Lara, let's start with you. What does employee well-being involve? What are the key aspects for employee well-being?
Yes, so generally speaking, there's a holistic approach to it. I think we've heard it in the presentation before, from physical to mental to emotional well-being. And yeah, for companies really to look at it, one from an individual perspective and then also from an organizational perspective, that both needs measures for it to work as a whole. It can't be just sole aspects to look at. And maybe to conclude this, as you said, short, to me, the most important, or the most important factor we know from studies is one, the social support system, and also the management that has a major impact, especially on my side, speaking for the mental health of employees. There was a recent study by Fortune that just stated that 60% of employees agree that managers is the biggest influence on their health at work. And yeah, this is, I think, a major contributor, bigger than therapists or doctors can have on our well-being. And one thing that I want to enforce here.
Wow, okay, that's a strong statement, thank you. I saw you both nodding. Maybe you, Thorben Albrecht, so do you agree? Do you want to add something? So I saw you nodding, so I think you agree, but maybe you want to add something.
Yes, thank you. I do agree, and I really want to stress that also we as trade unions see these factors as very important. But some of the more traditional sector effects are still here to stay. So the issue of pay, the issue of job security still is important for employee well-being. There has been just a survey by Xing asking people, are you ready to change your job? And 1/3 said yes. And if asked what are the motives for changing a job, you still have nearly half of the workers saying it's about pay issues. Then right behind that, you have too much demand, stress, intensity of your job. So it's both around there. And I think we have to look at both sides of employee well-being when we talk about finding ways how to improve employee well-being for fostering productivity.
Absolutely, thank you. Karina van der Voorde, do you also want to add something? So on the question, what are the key aspects on employee well-being? I think, of course, you had your presentation, but I think there's more to add.
Yeah, I think I fully agree with Lara and Thorben. I think, yes, indeed, there are multiple aspects of well-being. So like the happiness, relationship, but also health well-being, and all three are important. You cannot neglect like one of them. And also in terms of more important, I think the mental health is indeed very important. Also, we see that here in the Netherlands, there is a lot of people are suffering from that. So there's a real need to take that into account. But also, I think the relationship types of well-being, we work a little bit more remotely nowadays. So how to stay involved, how to stay connected, I think it's also an important question. And indeed, I also agree with Thorben that it's a mix of things we should take into account. So it's indeed also providing job security, good wages, good benefits, training opportunities, but also thinking about involvement. I feel that decision making is also very important, to the ability or the opportunity to participate in that. And indeed, also work demands. So also an important aspect if we talk about well-being.
Mm-hmm. So there are a lot of aspects we can work on, and we should improve, and work life should improve. But so, are there any best practices? Do you know how to go there, how to get there, so that we have more well-being and more performance in the workspace? So I would be really happy if you could give me some examples, be it for individual things or just for company things. So if there's anything, maybe Lara, you as you work very closely with companies, if there's anything you like to share, I'm really happy about this.
Yeah, I mean, again, generally speaking, I always like to simplify this complex challenge that we have to it being a model of, let's say, green to red. And what I've seen in the past, we know from the 1950s, companies started with so-called employee assistance programs, which is basically a phone hotline that you can turn to when you have any kind of mental or even personal issues in your own environment. And this is for us rather in the red, because we see it reaches about 1 to 3% of the employees, and it is rather a reactive kind of support that you can turn to, but not really maybe, let's say, when the burnout spiral or the depression spiral starts, that companies actually manage to get their employees way before they support them in their abilities, their skills. They sensitize for them to be aware of their own self-care, all that. So this is for us rather looking in the yellow part where we need competencies to be built that can be done through trainings, can be also done through digital tools that I think we might come to later. But then also in the green, where it's the responsibilities of companies to sensitize, be that health newsletters that the company sends around, be that, again, trainings, mandatory trainings for managers that are set, that really, to me, the best practice here, moving from the reactive support in the red to more of a proactive support in the green that can be done with various tools.
Okay, so big variety again. Mr. Albrecht, so when it comes to responsibility for companies, I think that's your issue, that's your topic. So what do companies need to change? How do they need to change in order to get more employee well-being, to get more happy and healthy workers?
Yeah, I think maybe two examples to show that sometimes things are a bit more complicated than they look in the first place. That there are conditions if you really want to have win-win situations. One is about autonomy. I think a lot of companies are giving their workers more autonomy, and that's a good thing. Workers want this. But if it's not accompanied by qualification and giving the competences Lara also talked about to the workers to deal with this autonomy, to use it, then it also can backfire, because it could lead to blurred lines, to overload of work. So I think autonomy is a good thing, but it has to be introduced in a good way. To give you a second example, that is about flexibility. Of course, a lot of workers want to work much more flexible than they did in the past. And of course, the pandemic has increased this wish. But we also have to see that the flexibility the company and the management the flexibility workers want is not always the same. So that's why we talk about negotiated flexibility, and that's something important for us as trade unions as well, to find ways to come to more flexible working arrangements, but arrangement that suit both the company's need and the workers' need. And that has to be negotiated because there are conflicts around that too. So I think autonomy, flexibility are good things, but they have to be introduced in the right way to really lead to a win-win.
Yeah, I agree. I think so you need some kind of rules, even if you have more autonomy. That was a perfect example for my next question, because I would like to ask you something about COVID-19. So you already mentioned that it changed the demand for flexibility. Ms. van der Voorde, is this something you also experience in your studies, or is this something you saw in your studies, that people crave or want more flexibility since the pandemic started?
Yeah, I think it's in general a trend in Europe and worldwide. I think that people now experienced what it is to have flexibility. Because of that COVID-19 pandemic, it was kind of a natural, unique experiment in that way. So yes, I think people really are looking for more flexibility. But I also agree with Thorben that it needs to be surrounded by a kind of a system that it's indeed negotiated, but that it's a win-win for all of them. So for both workers and organizations. And it can also be like negative implications of more flexibility. So it can help with work-life balance. But if you can't stop working and your work like for more than 10 hours are always available, so there's also a risk involved. And then the same holds for autonomy. We all know that it can also lead that you take too much responsibility, so that you cannot recover from your daily demands anymore. So yes, I do see a change, but there's also, of course, a risk involved that we should be very careful about, that it's not at the cost of employee health in the end.
So it's all about the balance in the end.
Yeah.
Okay. Lara, how was the first years of the pandemic for Evermood? So did you mention that people needed more support, or did they change the way of working? So how was it from your business perspective?
In the very first half year, I felt companies were really rather reactive to implementing measures. They were working on a lot of different issues, especially health managers that I talk to nowadays. They are now ready to implement new health measures, since also the way health measures worked before the pandemic versus now is very much different. So we had much more on-site trainings, and people actually came together, which has a big value indeed, of course. But now that I see a lot of corporates who struggle a lot with having employees move back to the office environment, really the only way to reach the whole workforce is to implement measures that are digital in the sense. So it really took a while to structure what measures do we have, what can we continue doing, and in what way do we need to have the setup nowadays for it to work. And I think in this way, us personally, or as a company, as a startup, we've seen the highest growth in the past 1.5 years. After the companies had some time to look on what's going on.
So first there was maybe the shock, but then they realized there's a lot to do, and it's very important to get your people happy and healthy. Earlier you mentioned the role of leadership, and the role of management to implement measures for employee well-being. Do you have a concrete example? So I'm sure there are a lot of managers and people managers who are who are following our discussion. So if I want to change something, if I want to implement new measures on well-being, what are the first steps? What should I do?
Yes, so I think really 50% of the companies in Germany probably have already some kind of systems in place. They might have a health webinar every now and then, which is ways to start. They might have a social counselor or someone from the works council who is confident that you can turn to, or maybe also an external hotline that you can call to. And I think my first message would be again moving from the reactive ends to preventive or proactive approach. And then the second aspect, which I see a lot, and especially with larger corporates, is that the intranets and the way to communicate towards employees is often so cluttered that the main issue, even if you have services, is allowing for the communication and for the seamless integration for it to actually reach the employee in the end. And this has to be solved, or this is maybe even more important than, what exact solution you provide. So in that sense, I see a lot of pain with having here a meditation app, here's something that you can use for addiction, here's a DIGA certified solution for depression, etc. And for this to be combined in one place, easy to access, anonymously to be accessed to blue and white collar employees who basically just access a QR code or see a flyer or whatever, and they don't have to input their email or anything, because this topic is so stigmatized and so personal that really companies have to make it very low barrier for it to be accessed. And as the third step, I should have mentioned this in the beginning, but still, the management, the leadership is maybe your starting point. So having maybe also allowing for mandatory trainings to be set, and in that regard, moving away for the leadership development, moving away from every 2 to 3 years we're doing a seminar on a certain topic, because honestly, most leaders don't really like those full day seminars, because the day after they have to undo everything they learned the day before, they have to overwork everything that they missed the day before. And the moment they need it, they don't really know what they learned 2 years ago in that one seminar. So again, here, digital tools can help in the sense that you have know-how provided in very short video clips and guides and things that people can just access the same way we work with Instagram or YouTube nowadays, has also to be transferred to the workplace for it to really be practically to be adapted, especially for the leaders, but also for employees themselves who like to evolve and to develop on their resilience.
Okay, so start with your management, use digital tools, but don't the wide umbrella, but just keep them consolidated. And okay, I think that's a very good point. You also mentioned that you can use it without giving your email address or something like this, so that you can just use it if you need it. All right, and so you also mentioned the digital tools and that they can help, for example, with a short video or something like this. I would like to also ask the question to you two, so Karina van der Voorde and Thorsten Albrecht. What are the benefits of digital tools at this end? So did they change something in while we had the pandemic? How do you see the maybe benefits, but also like Lara said, so maybe if you have too much tools, then it's also chaos. How do you see the benefits, maybe not so much benefits of digital tools? Maybe Karina, would you like to start?
Yes, I think there are indeed benefits of digital tools, but indeed there are lots of them. So I think you should be really careful that you have the ones that work for your employees or for the specific thing that the worker wants to work on. And I think there is also such a lot available that you should also be very careful that there is a proven effectiveness of these interventions. So I would not go and try everything out there, but make a wise decision like this is what we need, this is what the employee needs in terms of what specific things need to be addressed, and then search for an intervention that has proven to be effective in this regard, because indeed there's so much out there. So also be aware that you pick something that has shown to be effective in the past. And then secondly, a little bit to add, I would also be aware that sometimes we now focus a little bit more on the individual level, so individual interventions. But sometimes it might be that it's not an individual issue, but a structural issue. For example, that the workload is simply too high for all of your team members. And then you can start with these individual interventions. And of course, they will help to a certain extent because you train people to cope with these high demands. But in the end, the original issue is not addressed. So I would always also start by checking or exploring, is this really an individual issue? Or is there something in the work environment that might need to be changed?
Mm-hmm. Mr. Albrecht, do you want to add something? Otherwise, I have a question from the audience, but we can do this after this if you want to say something.
Oh, just briefly, I think digital tools are just tools, and I think that's what we really have to understand. And I think Karina already hinted at this. They have to be introduced in a way that they are really useful. Tools could be too heavy and making things complicated, or they can make your life easier. And the easiest way to take the tools in the right way and also decide which tools to use, like Karina said, is by involving workers having a say already in the beginning when tools are chosen, when tools are designed for the specific workplace. This helps a lot to have the tools being more effective and better for the workers to use.
Okay, yeah, I think it's a very good hint. So a tool can only be a tool at the end. I have one question from the audience I would like to read, and you can decide whoever wants to answer. What we talked about the measures for the management, but what measures would you recommend for team members if the management doesn't see the necessity to proactivate healthcare? So is there something you can do from the bottom, like you can evolve a change?
You can establish a works council that might help.
Very good hint. Do you want to add something, Lara or Karina van der Voorde?
Look, sorry, you go first.
Okay, yeah. I think potentially also you can see this in the numbers that you have, for example, in your annual surveys or your working conditions surveys. Maybe they hint that there is an issue and that you, as an HR manager, should talk to the manager that there are some issues visible in this survey, and hopefully you also discuss these results both with the employees and also in the work council, so that you do recognize or at least start working on having the mutual understanding that there is something that needs to be addressed or needs to be solved. So I think, that's my suggestion here.
Yeah, I was just thinking of two practical examples. One is a development of a mental health first aider, or like a supporting person within the company that can be this trust person that you can develop into. I feel many employees themselves take a development to that end, to be this person within the company that others can trust to. And another similar example to this is like employee resource groups. I mean, in large corporates, there has been heaps of employees who had addiction issues or who have other mental burdens, so they come together as a group who can again be talked to whenever employees experience something, to help with what they've come through. So there is, or I don't know, even in our company, there's a meditation group of people who make this a practice and then tell others about it. So there is certain things you can do bottom up. But again, it's really hard, and I want to strengthen the point that also you, Karina, mentioned before with the structures, because there you even get the backlash of employees when you start, when there's high pressure and the structures are not set and the culture is toxic, and you start implementing a mental health webinar and try to make that shiny aspect of your culture, it rather turns to the other ends. And one other thing also, Karina, that when you said the measures or the surveys that you need to do to actually know where to start. In Germany, at least, we have a mandatory regulation called Gefährdungsbeurteilung psychischer Belastungen. It's a really bad term. It's a mental health assessment sort of thing that companies have to do. So maybe even that bottom up, you can push and say, we have to do this. And from there, you also mandatory to elaborate measures from it, which is normally when companies come to us and say, look, we've identified those patterns. In what way can your platform help us solve this and that and that? Or at least this is also a way to come. Regulatories always help.
Absolutely, thank you so much. So I hope whoever had the question is answered and you got some help to do some bottom-up work there. So there's one topic left I would really like to talk with you about, and as we have only a few minutes, let's switch over to this topic. I already mentioned it in the introduction. It's the 4-day working week. So as I said, there are different pilots at the moment, for example, in the UK, but there are other models like in Belgium where people have to work the same number of working hours, but in 4 days, so that they have a longer weekend. But there are also a lot of other examples all across the world where companies try to start a 4-day working week. And I think that's a topic, I think in Germany we're maybe at the starting point there, but I think that's really attractive and interesting to talk about. And that's why I would like to ask you, Thorsten, Albrecht, the IG Metall has called for a shorter working week. Which model do you prefer?
I think it's important that we talk about a model where we do have a reduction of working time over the week, and not the Belgian model, just put them on different days. And for me, 4-day working week is also always a symbol. Could be other models of reduced working times that fit more to the company or to the individual. We need some kind of compensation for the pay losses that go along with hourly pay. So in the British model, you had 100% pay for 80% of the working time. I think this is a good approach, but this has to be negotiated, a lot of things around it, but this should be the general direction. And then we can see that, of course, productivity gains are there, but only if companies, while reducing the working times, also look at how work is organized. And I think that has become very clear both in the British model, but also in the Iceland model. You have to really look at how you organize work, because only then you can have this productivity gains, of course, which then pay also for the pay compensation. So I think these aspects are very important. And we have had some experiences in some companies already, also in non-knowledge work, where this model of the 4-day working week does work out. And I think it's a very good thing we should also discuss more and implement also in Germany.
Absolutely. So I think it's not only a model for people who are working in front of a computer. It should be possible now for everyone. A question for all of you. So a bit wider view. So what are the advantages and disadvantages for a 4-day week for the three of us, for the employees, for the employers, but also for the culture? So I think there's also a bigger picture there. And I think that would be a perfect last question. So I would ask all of you to answer this. Would be really happy to get your input on this. Maybe let's start. I have on the bottom left there is Karina van der Voorde. Maybe you want on the start.
Yeah, I think there are lots of potential advantages, but I agree with Thorben that it's very important to see how you implement this. So indeed, again, the support systems, but also in terms like that you do reduce the working hours and not like the Belgian model that you do like 9 working hours on 4 days, because then I can see also really big disadvantages of such a model. But the potential advantage, I think, is of course potentially a better work-life balance for the employees, because they work 4 days and on their 5th day they have time for their kids or to take care of other people. So I think that would be very, very helpful. So more free time also. Potentially it also helps more on a societal level with gender equality issues, so that all people in the household can take care of the kids more equally. Maybe also even job creation, because then potentially some companies need to hire additional people. But I think we only talk about advantages here. So I see these and also job productivity gains as most important ones now.
Oh, thank you very much. So I have you on my screen, and if I go clockwise, then there's Lara as next. So what are advantages and disadvantages of a 4-day week from your perspective?
Yeah, adding to what Karina said, what also popped to my mind is when employees are happier with a better work-life balance, we also have less of an issue when it comes to retaining them, to having better cultures, to having them be more relaxed, more happy, which also means less conflict, less frustration that I guess a lot of people have a lot of times in workplaces too. With disadvantages, popped to my mind if this might be a thing that in German we say überstülpen, that we kind of try to put on everybody, and then there might be others who say, look, I love work. I love working 6 days a week or be that whatever. And I can feel there could be an imbalance, at least knowing when I'm off a day or two and other people work the whole day. I have a lot to catch up on, even just looking in my Slack and emails or similar. So finding a balance here that allows us to work asynchronously still. And also one other disadvantage where I'm not too familiar with the studies themselves, it seems that I might be just as productive even working less, but I would fear that my work schedule within the 4 days just gets even more packed, and then I work until late, which has worse impact on my sleep again, which is a major influencer for mental health. But yeah, I'm really eager to look more into this, and also to hear your perspective.
Yeah, thank you. And I think you're completely right. We really have to know how to introduce things. And that's why I said this has to go along with work organization. You really have to cut unnecessary meetings. You have to take out things that are rather distracting than being productive. And so the way that it's organized, it's important, but then we can really have very positive impact. I said we could see that people spend more on sports, which help them, their health, both physical, but also mental health dimension. People have been more engaged in society. Karina already mentioned the gender issues also include not only having some people working less, but also some involuntary part-time work, people getting the chance to work more, as well as for the society. There are also environmental issues like you have less commuting, etc. So I think it's a really model worth looking at from societal perspective, from the company's perspective, and from the employee's perspective.
Super. Thank you so much. I think there's a lot of topics we could do in an own panel on, so maybe next time we're only talking about the 4-day week. It was really, really interesting talking to you. Yeah, and sad time is over. It's always like this. But thank you again for your input. Thank you, Lara from Petersdorff-Campen from Evermood. Thank you, Dr. Karina van der Voort from the Tilburg University. And thanks to Thorben Albrecht from the IG Metall. Great to have you here. And in the end, one hint, there's also a workshop today. I think it starts in 20 minutes from Lara from Petersdorff-Campen. It's about strengthening the mental health in the company. So if you want to join, feel free.